Hello everyone and welcome back. I wanted to do a second installment for you all just in case you were still curious about answering the question, can the Maiden's method make my writing better? This is something where I want to be able to break into specifically what we're doing in each stage, how you can kind of apply the right questions and things to consider when it comes to actually developing characters, shaping your stories, and maybe even getting past some writer's block that you might have had in the past. So last time we addressed the blackening stage, and that's really as far as we got. So within that color phase, that's where I want to move on into the whitening. But this one likely is going to take 2 videos. I'm not going to be too optimistic and assume we can get it all done in one, because it's probably better just to be able to flesh each one out and make sure that you're getting as much of an idea of each individual stage and the things to be accomplished in those moments without feeling like I'm not giving you enough information. So, of course, you can go to other channels on this, other videos on this channel and go through those and kind of see some other different breakdowns, especially of the blackening phase as it's been put out. More is going to be coming here on the whitening very soon. So for now, just as specifically within the writing question of it all, let's talk about the whitening phase. So this actually, the reason it's going to take longer is because this is the phase that takes the longest period of the whole storytelling. In many ways, it goes kind of from the end of Act 1 all the way to the beginning of Act 3. It really does span the whole chunk. It's everything. So what we want to see is how to move through along the more well-known story beats and get to each position a little bit more smoothly. Because what you're going to find, if you're familiar at all even with like Save the Cat, that is one of those where, regarding the story beats as they lay out for each of these, the black is the premise. I mean, that's all it is. It's just the setup as far as Save the Cat terminology is concerned. It's very quick. The black is basically your elevator pitch. So when you are actually starting to write the character, develop who they are and what they're doing, and to get into this a little bit more, you're going to find that it's going to be a lot more acute for you to be able to pinpoint specifically how your characters are moving, and it's not something, the whitening phase really isn't the kind of thing that comes within the pitch. That's what you see in the movie. That's the meat of it all. So this is where you're going to see your main group of character development. Again, going back to that terminology of the Save the Cat, you're going to see the debate break into 2, the B story and the promise of the premise. Those are the big chunks that are going to come out in the white. I'm not going to go into each of those too much, of course. If you want to go look those up, they're online, and it's a really interesting breakdown. So I would suggest, if you're familiar with any of these plot structures, hero's journey, Save the Cat, stuff like that, that's where you're going to want to know the beats of the story, and you might be a little bit more familiar with some of the terminology that I'm using as we break down how they work within each other, because they correspond. They're not conflicting, they're complementary structures, and you might want to just be a little bit more aware of how one interlocks with the other. So just to give you a quick example, we're not going to stay here, but the yellowing stage, as far as the Maiden's method, is going to be the midpoint of the Save the Cat method. The red, the multiplication phase, it's pretty short as far as the Maiden's concerned, but if you're doing a hero's journey, you have a lot more going on, what is kind of her yellow and red. So the hero is going through, that's the bad guys close in. Of course, for the Maiden, that's going to be the feminine threat rears more severely. You're going to get All is Lost, Dark Night of the Soul, and presumably all of that's supposed to happen before even Act 3 totally breaks, because Act 3 is your summation. It's just getting down to the end of things and saying, okay, we're done now, let's put a bow on it. So for the Maiden's method, you'll actually find that where most of her character development is going to come in the white, the yellow is the montage. It's a very short period of time, and we'll talk about that more in an upcoming video. But then the red is going to be more of the conclusion, that bow on the end, the cherry on top. And so we're going to back up here and address the first half of the whitening stage, which is the manufactured companions. So manufactured companion stage is about addressing who she is and who she's not. The basic idea is that the maiden doesn't know. She doesn't know yet what she is. She probably has an idea. She has some hopes. She has some dreams. She knows who she would like to be, and probably is fairly clear with herself that that's not what she is. Moana, of course, being a really good example of that. She knows what she wants to be. She wants to be a good daughter. She wants to be a ruler, but she also wants to be a wayfinder. And in the end, of course, getting ahead of myself, but not even in the end. This is at the end of her whitening phase, when she meets with her grandmother and has that moment in the reflective pool that's all around her, realizing, I am Moana. I'm all of those things. So what we're able to see with each of these characters is that they're going to use those kinds of mirrors to see themselves throughout the You see it with Rey when she has what is kind of a dark night of the soul moment, when she descends and she's confronting the Force a little bit and she sees the reflections of herself. That's what she's doing. She's going into that phase at which she really is confronting the self, seeing the image that she has of her own life and her own characterization versus the way that the world views her and where she's eventually going and where she should be. Those are not all the same thing. They should be. We want her to get to that place where she ought to be and where she's going and where she wants to be are all the same location. That's important, because until then you just have more character conflict and there's no resolution in any of that yet. So what we want to decide is what type of manufactured companion you're writing. Now, whether you are using the Maiden's method and laying out the whole thing and saying, assigning points of your character movement to the story, which you can do, that's rarely how most people work. You probably already have an idea in mind, and you might have a few things of where you know where you want her to go, but you're not quite breaking through on this. And again, I say her generally. You can do this with a male or female character. But what you want to do then is, if you already have an idea in mind and what you're trying to do is break through on some of these, or maybe put something in a different context that allows you to see this differently and get a few breakthroughs, what you're going to want to find in defining all of these steps, specifically with the manufactured companion, is that it's actually going to speak a lot to the character's individual development when depending on how she manifests her manufactured companion is going to speak a lot to how your maiden is going to view herself. Now, what I mean by that, I'll go ahead and explain just by breaking down the three of the characters. You have three manifestations of the manufactured companions in creatures, dreams, and doppelgangers. Creatures are those that are actual physical animals, people, something that is physically there, may have been literally or metaphorically manufactured by the maiden, and that she is perpetuating and interacting with an actual physical, quote-unquote, living being. Dreams are where it's not even quite clear to her whether this thing is real. She wants it to be, or she might be fully aware that it's not, but she's willing to act as if it is. Now, of course, any one of these more or less falls under the imaginary friend category, but we're going to come to that a little bit later. I'll give you the examples of those in a moment, and you'll see what I mean. The third being doppelganger. This often is one when the maiden is taking on her own manufactured companion. She is becoming her own companion in that she's not being herself, she's being someone else in order to, quote unquote, accompany herself within her own head. And So what you're going to find going forward is that each of these are, well, absolutely necessary in order for the maiden to truly understand who she is and how she's interacting with the world. That's a question you're going to want to ask yourself as a writer. How is she dealing with the things that are happening around her? I mean, granted, if she is going to be put in as a doppelganger, often what's happening is she's probably hiding herself, which is something we talked about in the blackening phase, that hidden away stage isn't necessarily coming through the feminine threat, or rather the feminine threat might just be an internal one, and she is threatening herself, hiding herself, and doing so by acting in a way that is not her. That's a doppelganger. She looks a whole lot like herself, but it's not actually her. So, for example, let's go back to creatures. The kinds of things you're going to see are like Olaf in Frozen. He is literally manufactured by Elsa, but is an autonomous creature that is moving and interacting with the world, that goes and leaves her, even though the way that she interacts with him is actually pretty minimal. Of course, he's a little bit more there for Anna, and we'll talk about that in a later method, because Anna's the one following the Maiden's method, and Elsa is the feminine thread of that story. So we'll get back to that a little bit later. Now, that's another manufactured companion for you, but keep in mind, and you can see our video on this, Finn is a manufactured companion for Rey because he's not interacting with her in a real way. She is sort of projecting her own idea on him, which eventually gets shattered when she realizes that he's not been fully truthful with her. And so the image that she has built up in her head and the resistance fighter that she's been working with this whole time is shattered when she realizes that he doesn't care a lick about the resistance. He wants to run away, and he doesn't want to be part of this fight. So part of her own self-image and the confidence that she's built up in being able to say, hey, I've got this other guy that's going with me, that all falls apart pretty quickly for her. Now, another example of the creature, an interesting one, occurs in the movie Stardust. When Yvain is talking to Tristan, I think I'm remembering their names, Tristan, I remember the characters. When he turns into the mouse, she starts talking to him in a way that she's never spoken to Tristan before. She is only interacting with herself in the way that there is this little mouse creature there for her to talk to, but she's not talking to him, she's talking at him. She doesn't even think that he's listening. There's this little mouse creature, and so she talks as if she's talking to him and learns something deep about herself in the process. As much as any one of us, even like I am here now talking aloud to no one in the car, you, my manufactured companion, and my audience here, I don't know if I have an audience. No one may ever watch this video, but I'm going to act as if I have one, and I'm going to manufacture you in the only way that I can in my own brain, and to be able to work through that. So I learned something about myself talking aloud to quote unquote nobody. Now, when the dream phase comes in, it's interesting because you actually tend to see this one. Some of the best examples I have are not women. They're not the female characters that we have for traversing the Maiden's method. Rather, it's like Scrooge. Did Ebenezer Scrooge actually meet with 3 physical spirits? That are they manipulating him and drawing him? Did they physically take him throughout the world? Did he time travel that night? Or was this a dream? Was this a specter? Was this his own psyche and imagination working through his dreams? Was he self-actualizing in some way? Whether you want to look at this in the more mystical sense or in maybe a physiological, psychological sense, it's hard. The answer may just be yes to all. So that's kind of the fun part about writing a dream. Did Dorothy, did she actually go to Oz? Was she swept up in a tornado to this magical land? And did she return by the magic of the shoes? Or was she just hit on the head laying in bed and realizing this whole time, what am I doing, and running away? Was it a dream or was it real. The question of the dream phase. Dexter Morgan, and in Dexter, his father, Harry Morgan, is not a physical being. He does not interact with the world. He is not dependent. He's not independent. He is fully dependent on Dexter and his own mindset, where you even see like Brian come in at one point when his quote unquote dark passenger actually starts to manifest itself. He's where Harry is like his light passenger. Dexter always talks about his dark passenger. And there is a point where, without giving too much away, I'll just say that Brian is one of those that gets manifested as his dark passenger, to whom he listens and follows and learns something about himself by speaking these things, quote unquote, aloud. Now, when you want, in a writing sense, probably like with, if you were actually writing a book as opposed to writing a screenplay, you're going to probably encounter a different avenue to use this trope through maybe an internal dialogue. That could be something pretty interesting that you might want to consider. But also know that this is going to differentiate how your character actually thinks that they are versus how they are. I mean, let's face it, we all run into this. I have a self-image that is not the image that the world has of me. Many people struggle with this on a deep psychological level because we want to be able to match what the world perceives of us, not necessarily to meet their expectations, but rather just to allow their reactions to match the expectation we had. We want them to match our expectations and to pull in something there. When will my reflection show who I am inside? Now, that is a big question, and something that, Mulan spends her whole movie doing, that she does in the form of a doppelganger. You can see probably one of the biggest tropes for the girls that you see all the time, and where you're going to see a big doppelganger thing show up, is in those movies when she's dressing up like a boy in order to be able to accomplish something. You've got Mulan, Yentl, She's the Man. Now, aside from those, though, let's break apart a couple of others. Miss Congeniality is a really good, she is not herself. She is not Gracie Hart. She is not an FBI agent. She is taking herself away from her comfort zone entirely to become a completely different person. And in doing so, she confronts parts about herself that she had abandoned a long time ago. This femininity, these concept that she never liked about herself, and the kind of thing that she doesn't start to actually realize and understand until she's in the final five doing it all by herself at this point, and doesn't have the help of the FBI actually backing her, even with a voice in her ear kind of thing. Now, that being said, the manufactured companions are the other girls in the pageant. They are creatures, whereas she is becoming our doppelganger. You can see some of these things work with each other in that way. So every interaction that she has with the girls is fake. Every single thing that they are learning about her, everything that she is projecting upon them. But see, because they don't know that it's fake, she has to be somewhat genuine. And in doing so, of course, she never truly completely detaches. It's like allowing your shadow to interact with a person. And like Mean Girls, that's another great example of Katie having to be someone that she's not, or rather maybe even wants to be, presumably so that she can destroy Regina George. But eventually she starts falling into the idea, and she herself becomes a plastic. So she's even more fake. She's not different. she's not differentiating pieces of herself in order to understand what the real is. She's doing so to extract and lean into what is the fake side. Now she's going to have that broken for her eventually when Aaron Samuels holds the mirror up to her and says, who are you? You're just a Regina clone, and nobody wants that. So that's when she has to confront some of these, and we'll get into that a bit more in Woman Know Thyself. So Anastasia is another one that's really good because she is not deliberately being her own doppelganger, and whereas many of these other girls are, she is obviously, she looks like herself, and she is kind of being manufactured by Dimitri, and can't remember the other character's name, shoot, when each of them are pushing her to become Anastasia. They, of course, don't know that she is the real Anastasia, but neither does she. They both are willing to perpetuate this lie for the idea of what, they sell as the greater good. And for those movements to be made, Anastasia eventually, it's like when she starts remembering things that I don't believe we told her that. Those are moments when they're able to recall bits that are actual memories and revelations of something that she otherwise shouldn't have known. And so going through the doppelganger phase actually allows her to differentiate those pieces of herself. Unlike Katie Heron, she's not leaning into the fake, she's leaning into the real. Imperceptibly for a while, but that's kind of the character development, is that when she starts to really lean into what she is and can be, that's when you start to understand, oh my goodness, I am Anastasia. And she hits into that Woman Know Thyself phase, and you start on with the character development and the story as it goes from there. So just understand going forward that the whitening phase is not always an easy thing to confront. In order to distill and purify, yeah, that sounds nice. I mean, if we think about like spas and cleanliness and whitening and things in that way, but its purification is really usually more about fire and bleach and destroying the things that should not continue. So when you are making these decisions for your character, allow for them to know and fear the decisions that they're making. Confronting the self is a rough thing, and to hang on to these imaginary friends is something that she, if you're going for more fanciful, may never have to do. But if you're going for something a little bit more realistic and maybe psychologically based in a character revelation come Woman Know Thyself, understand that she might actually have to deeply reconsider whether or not she wants to go through with this at all. And if she doesn't, you might end up with a Snow Queen. And that means that she's going to perpetuate making fake friends, living in a dream world, and or making herself into something that she's not, even though she may look a whole lot like something real. That's not who she actually is, but she's going to keep every single bit of herself geared toward that singular goal of perpetuating the fake reality that she would prefer that were true. So, as we move forward, keep those things in mind. Feel free to comment. Of course, if you have anything that we can move forward in any of these videos, I'd love to hear back from my audience. So please let me know what kind of questions you have and things that I might be able to answer for you moving forward. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, the whole shtick. So have a great day, guys.